Welcome to Money Chic, Financial Education with Shari Resch, the podcast that's here to empower you with the knowledge and skills you need to master your personal finances and live your best financial life. Today, I'm so excited for our conversation. I'm joined by Dawn Smith. Dawn is a coach, counselor, and speaker who supports individuals through life's major transition points. Her business is called Relationship Coach Dawn. For over a decade, she has served as a career transition coach for hundreds of professionals and a premarital counselor who has worked with nearly 1,000 marrying couples. When the pandemic hit, Dawn began hearing from more and more couples in crisis and decided to bring together the emotional safe space and neutrality of traditional couples counseling with the solution-based tools of coaching to offer a shorter-term alternative to traditional couples counseling. So Dawn, thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, this is an exciting topic. Good morning, Shari.
Good morning. It's interesting that you say, it does feel like sometimes when you're in counseling or couples, when's the end point, right?
Exactly.
We're going to do that. Are we going to be in this forever? So that's a really unique perspective that you're saying. And on your website, relationshipcoachdawn.com, it's very clear. We're not doing this forever.
No, definitely
I'm giving you the tools and you're moving on.
Yeah. And, I tease people on the initial consultation and I say, my goal is to talk myself out of a job every time. But it's kind of true. I love that we're starting from there because it's so important to me. I create what I would want. And I have off the charts ADD. And one of the things about those of us with ADD is that at our best, we're very efficient, right? And we can be very sort of practical and creative problem solvers. And that's what I would want. I think it can be very intimidating for a lot of people who haven't done counseling or therapy to feel like, first I have to find the right person and find the right fit. And then once I find the right fit, it might be once a week for months or years or the rest of my life.
Right. Is this a life sentence, right?
It's very expensive and it's very time consuming. And one of the best parts of my work is that I get to work with a lot of people who have never done any kind of counseling or therapy before because of whatever the impressions are around it. Yeah.
Do you find that your previous work as a career transition coach, if someone came to you and saying, I'm transitioning careers, they need to move fast, right? Exactly. There's more urgency, right?
Yeah. So the focus of my work, once I learned more about my ADD and the way I solve problems, it helped me to not only stick with this wonderful work that I love and figure out how to anchor and build and grow, but how to make transitions and solve problems in very small, very concrete ways. So the premise of a lot of my work is that you can problem solve in 20 minutes or less at a time, and really knock out these things. And with the couples coaching, the goal is give you the solutions and the knowledge and the information so you do the work, right? So we're not doing all the work in session. You two are having those conversations. You're growing, you're connecting, you're deepening your relationship in your own time.
So and I feel like that's similar with the way I work with my clients is that I'll give them homework and I'm not giving them all the answers in the meeting, but I'm giving them things to think about and homework. So where it feels like traditional counseling is kind of, you do the work in the session.
That's right.
And which maybe that's why it lasts forever because you're doing it during that hour period.
Right, exactly. That's probably part of why you and I resonated so quickly. Yeah, I love that approach. It's so considerate of your clients.
So over 1,000 couples, I mean, that is a staggering number that you've helped and worked with. So when you reflect back on your conversations and your experiences with them, is there a common theme that you see amongst these couples?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, there's so many different things, right? So yeah, it's been the gift of a lifetime that I get to do this work with so many people, and I specialize in multicultural interfaith. I speak French and Spanish, so a lot of bilingual couples and things like that. I think, on sort of a surface level, the common thing is that we're we're more similar than different, but at the same time that opposites attract. I find that the best couples tend to be the ones where they're yin and yang. They balance each other out, right? They have, as one of my good friends would say, one is the anchor and one is the string and one's the balloon, right? So you have the one that's maybe a little more grounded and the other that more floats. One's more of an organizer and planner. The other's more kind of go with the flow. And that, the rare couples I've met where they're really, really, really similar, they tend to have more of like a best friend roommate kind of vibe. Most couples I meet, I don't know if you've had that too, but most of them seem to have the yin and yang. And what happens with that is that, that balance is what draws them together, but it can also be what causes the friction when you have conversations, especially around money, which tends to be one of those areas where that difference of like, one is very grounded and maybe more of a saver, and the other is more like life is to be lived and we're going to spend more money short term. And that can be where the tension comes up.
Absolutely. Probably initially when you meet someone and they're different than you, it's attractive because, wow, they balance me out. Yeah. And then you're like, and then after time goes by, it's kind of like, they're really different than me. And, oh, how do I deal with that? Exactly. Especially, like you said, when it comes to money, any aspect of personality, when someone is different than you, it can initially be attractive or helpful because of different perspectives. But then it is work to then get through that and live in harmony, I think. And my listeners, when you talk about money, where one's a spender, one's a saver, they hear me all the time say everyone has a money personality. Generally speaking, you're savvy or you're a saver or you're a spender or you're a miser or life, I don't think anyone says YOLO anymore, but I haven't found a good word to replace it. But like you're YOLO, and it's very rare that both parties in a couple are the same. And yes, you can help balance each other out, where if one person is a spender and the other is a saver, you can say, all right, let's chill out a little bit, or here's some guardrails or restrictions. But then after time, resentment may build or conflict may erupt because you are different. And I feel like people can identify their personalities easily, right? You said I'm ADD. I want things quick. Everyone could kind of generalize their personalities and say what they like, how they operate, but not too often can people identify their money personality. So if you're having conflicts in your relationship with money, you may not even know the mind frame that you're operating from or your partner's operating from to even resolve it. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's true. So if 99 times out of 100, I'm not a betting person, but I'm willing to bet that when working with couples, or if you're part of a couple, you do not have the same money personality as your partner. Right. Exactly. So how do we shift from, disagreements about money to conflicts? What's kind of the tipping point? Yeah, that's such a good question. I love that you're asking me this too, because, I'm one of those people who has a hard time talking about money or feels tension around the money conversations, right? And yet it's so vital that what I tell couples is there's a million ways you can go about it, right? And I also tell them right away, I'm not a financial planner, but I'll send you to someone who is. But I can tell you the right questions to ask yourselves and the right way to start these conversations. That's what I tell couples. And I've seen successful couples who merge every penny, right? And I've seen successful couples who keep every penny separate. Most couples, and I would imagine this has been your experience, most couples choose to do most of their money in a joint and keep some separate. And then it's a question of what exactly does that look like? But to me, the bigger issue here is don't be arbitrary, right? There's a million ways you can go about it, but make sure you're transparent with each other. And so one of the things I do work with couples on is having a calendar, right? Where we're going to schedule certain things
that this isn't your Google or your Outlook of your day-to-day tasks and your work stuff and your trips that are coming up. This is that handful of things that is going to help you to have sort of ritualize your values, right? So once a month, let's sit down and talk about money. Let's look at the budgets. Let's make some, let's at least face it, because the more you look at it, the less there is to look at each time, right?
Right.
And so that's the important piece of it, is just don't be arbitrary. Start getting very clear about that. I'll share one last little thing. There's a little exercise. I don't know what you think of this, but I tell couples the Post-it exercise. So grab a Post-it separately, spend 5 minutes, make a little pie chart, and show, you don't have to put exact numbers or even exact percentages, but divvy it up about how you think the buckets should be of where money is spent, right? So this much for home and utilities, this much for travel, this much for maybe charity, service, philanthropy, this much for entertainment, food, right? So do your buckets and then get back with your partner and see if they line up, because chances are they don't, but at least now you know where to start the conversation from.
That's a great exercise because it shows what you value, right? What you'd rather spend your money on. So if one partner has a huge slice for entertainment and dining out, you show that shows that they value experiences, right? So in my household, that's my husband. He values experiences, and it took me a long time to kind of put the puzzle pieces together. And then once I did, I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. Our minds just work differently. So, I like stuff. I spend my money on stuff. I could give or take a nice dinner as long as, I am full. I'm happy, right? I don't prioritize going out to eat or anything like that, where my husband does.
Yeah.
But I do like to buy a trinket or a decoration or something for my house because I can see it. Yeah. So that's what I value, is seeing what I'm spending my money on, where he likes the experience of it. So once we identified, like, hey, our values and what we want to spend our money on are different.
Yes.
And one's not right or wrong, but now I understand, and he understands, like, we're just different, where he goes and plays a round of golf. I'm like, that's your hobby, and that's great. My hobby is buying an antique plate and hanging it on the wall. That's what I enjoy, and it's different. And I really like that Post-it exercise, because it does show, it sets expectations of, this is how in a perfect world, how we would spend our money.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
So how often do you find couples really talk about money before they get married, or they buy a house together, they move on and move into a bigger step of their relationship? Is it talked about enough?
It's so interesting, and I'll answer, but then I'm so curious what your experience has been. I think they feel like they do. It's a topic like everything else. I don't think I've met a marrying couple yet who says, "Oh, we've never ever talked about money," right? But I guess what's interesting to me is I very, very rarely meet a couple that's done anything on a practical level in terms of like opening accounts together, right? Or really figuring out what the taxes are going to look like, or anything like that. It's always been this sense of, oh yeah, well, we talked about after we're married, we'll probably do some kind of a joint account. It's usually about as far as it gets, right? And I'll share one kind of funny story, but what I tell couples is, okay, yes, most couples end up, deciding to do joint and keeping a little bit separate. But what I would caution you is, make sure you have the same definition of joint, right? So just, again, not being arbitrary, it might feel silly to you, but sit down and actually itemize thing by thing what you think is joint. Because I once worked with a couple that had been together for years, and they said, oh, yeah, we know exactly, we have this joint account for joint stuff, and we keep the separate account for separate stuff. And I said, oh, okay, how'd you decide what comes out of it? Rent? And they both said, oh, yeah, that's joint. And I said, I don't know, cars? And they said, oh, yeah, we actually do that out of joint too. And I said, what about date nights? And one immediately said joint, and the other said, oh, no, that's individual. And we looked at each other and went, what? And they didn't realize that for years, I think, one had been paying it out of the joint and the other had been paying it on our personal credit card.
Oh, that's funny.
So don't be arbitrary, right? But
Yeah.
it's surprising to me how often, especially these days, most couples that I found before they get married, they're using an app to split expenses, or they're just kind of saying, well, I think this is about equal, and they're not doing the actual logistics of setting things up for the most part.
And what works for one couple works for one couple, right? Every couple is different as far as, right, what is a joint expense and what's a individual expense. But then there's also the issue of, what if there's a huge income discrepancy? What if one person
income
makes
discrepancy,
double?
or one thing I see a lot with the younger couples is if one feels like, oh, I'm bringing in all this debt, right? Or
Yeah.
it could be the other way around. It could be an inheritance, but more often than not, what I see at that stage is one is bringing in a debt and feels like that's their debt and they need to manage that debt. But I don't think that's really realistic. When you're married, you're operating from one pool, right? So the discussion becomes, what do we do? Which ties into all of my work with couples, with the relationship coaching as well, is the solutions need to be around the unit, right? If it's negotiating about one solution or the other solution, that tends to not work as well as saying, okay, wait a minute, we're a team, we're a unit, we are one. How do we figure out what works best?
And you can, I mean, also, my mind automatically goes to the numbers. If one party's bringing in debt and they're going to put their resources to eliminating that debt because that's their thing, then they're essentially paying less towards the household.
That's right.
Which then inadvertently the other partner's then picking up their slack, for lack of a better word. So in turn, everyone's paying for it anyway, right?
That's right.
So just kind of acknowledging it as, now it's ours, and how are we going to handle this together, I think is really good advice.
Nice. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So do you see generational patterns in when it comes to money and relationships that your couples bring with you? Like, well, this is the way my parents did it, or I want to avoid what my parents did. How much baggage do you see money wise that people bring into their relationships?
I definitely do. I don't know that it's changing that much. The tools are changing a lot, right? What we have access to is changing a lot. But I feel like there's still a lot of times this sort of stigma around talking about money, regardless of the age of my couples. I feel like, from 20s to 60s, there's still often sort of a stigma around really having those detailed conversations on a regular basis. I think a lot of us have this, I tell people not to minimize the very real challenges of not having enough money. I don't want to minimize that. But for the most part, I find that challenges that couples have around money are often more about the way, our association with money, the way we were brought up around money, a sense of lack or abundance more than the actual dollars and cents. And again, even though the way that we can handle it, the different tools and software and sites that are available to us, I feel like I still see a lot of the sort of the stigma and the associations that make it difficult to talk about in every generation. I don't know how you see it.
I agree that we could have the tools, the budgeting tools, the trackers, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But if we don't reflect on what has happened in our past, good or bad, that affects us now with money, if we don't ever acknowledge that and kind of sit in it, then we're not able to ever move past it, or at least acknowledge it and help us prepare for the future, or give us the wherewithal to know to make changes, or go, you know what? Oh, this is my, miser mindset. I feel bad for spending money, or I feel bad about this, or I feel like I'm a money, I can never have enough, right? Where enough is a feeling, enough isn't a number, and everyone's enough is different. So acknowledging that, I think, is so important, and reflecting on it. So how do we help couples work past this if they come in and money is like the biggest issue in the relationship, or it may not be the biggest issue, but it has to do with most of the issues in the
Right.
relationship? What do we, because it may be in the background. We may not even realize that we're dealing with a bigger money problem than just dollars and cents, right?
Yeah.
So how do we work through that
Yeah.
in your limited time frame? Because you don't work with everyone for a lifetime,
That's
right? So
right.
we have to move quickly at this.
That's right. That's right. So, I'm going to give it to you through my lens, which is coming from the coaching mindset more than the sort of financial advisor mindset, right?
Yeah.
For me, like all the challenges that couples come to me with, my goal is let me give you the knowledge and tools about how we process differently and how to hear each other and develop a solution that works for the unit. So one of the things, I work with same-sex couples as well, but men and women process differently. We are wired differently neurologically. They've done studies on this. And so we contextualize things differently and we communicate differently, right? And then the other part is that they've done studies that we listen to strangers better than we listen to our partners. And I think that goes back again to the yin and yang, where, one of the joys of relationships is that you start to feel that comfort level where you feel like you don't have to spell everything out for your partner. You can kind of finish each other's sentences. You know where each other's at when things are good, right? And when things are tense, we stop actually hearing the words our partner is actually saying. So I'm going to give a little bit of a roundabout answer to your question, but the biggest tool I use with couples is a form of active listening that we do it in two parts that I would kind of train my clients in. So part one is really just the hearing every word your partner is saying and repeating it back, basically, so that you're actually listening, not making assumptions, not paraphrasing. And then the part two is, okay, now we're going to generate a very concrete solution, and the other person can accept or reject it, but we're going to keep going until we've agreed to something that works for both of us. So in a conversation where there's tension around money, the solution might not even be, here's how we fix everything about it. The solution might be, okay, we're going to sit down every Thursday at 4 for 30 minutes until we have a system that makes sense, right? So it's that very practical part. And often what I find is if we can just sort of label what we're experiencing without judgment, without attachment, and just say, hey, I'm noticing that all my childhood stuff is coming up around this. I'm feeling myself shutting down, or, I'm noticing that I'm pissed off because you want to spend all of our money on like dining out and I really want to save it for that trip or for the kids or for, giving back or whatever. Sometimes us just naming what we're experiencing and going on can be really helpful to coming up with a system and solutions that work instead of just what often happens, which is making an in the moment decision and brushing it under the rug.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And I love how you set it as like a schedule. We're going to talk about XYZ, and in this case, money, every week, because you have to. I say to my clients all the time, like, we need it to live. We need it to function.
Yes.
We it's impossible to leave the house today and not spend money. So to not talk about it is really it's setting yourself up for issues down the line, whether saving or not saving, or emotional issues, or feeling ill prepared for the future. So I like that, having a lot of families, especially with young kids, will sit down on Sunday and say, what do we have going on this week, and creating a strategy around it, right? You could do the same thing with money. What do we have going on this week that is our money decisions, and let's talk it out now, versus like in the moment where we may feel a little bit stressed out, flustered, what have you, and then that may not be a productive conversation.
I love that. And for those of us who get uncomfortable talking about money per se, call it a goals conversation, right? What are we saving for? What do we want to spend on around what we enjoy, what we're excited about, what we have goals around? That's really what it's for. Money in and of itself serves no purpose. It is I don't want to get metaphysical and call it an energy, but it is a means to an end for the things that we value, right? It's about what do we value? What do we have goals around? What do we want? What lifestyle do we want? So, we can contextualize it that way instead of saying we're just talking about budgeting or finances. No, we're talking about our goals and our priorities and our values and the things that excite us.
It's a tool. It's a tool to achieve something is usually what I say. And whatever you want it to achieve that day, that's what its job is. And I also liked how you said for 30 minutes, we're going to talk about this.
Right.
So there's an
or
end
less.
point to
right.
it. So if it starts to get a little hairy, it's like, oh, the timer went off. Okay, we're done. We'll pick this up another day. Right.
Exactly.
I love that. I think that that's really great advice. Awesome takeaways. Anything else? I know everyone can find you at relationshipcoachdawn.com.
Yeah.
And you're giving away a free guide, 14 tips for happier relationships.
I am.
Yeah. So what other resources or any quick tips? You already gave away a ton, so I appreciate that in our short time together. But anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
I would just encourage people, check out the site. If you schedule a consultation, it's directly with me. So if you even want to say, hey, I heard you on Sherry's show, I had a question, or I just wanted to give you a compliment or a critique, you can find time to chat with me. But I think, if I had to sum up what this process is about, I think it's relief. That's the biggest gift that I can share, is just helping people come out of this moment that feels so, I'm sure you see this in your work, that we often feel like our problems are so personal and so isolating, and that nobody else must be going through it this way, and what's wrong with me. And that feeling of like, not only are you not alone, but these challenges are so common. And the good news is there's really, really, really simple ways, simple but not easy, right? But simple solutions to address this, to get clarity, to feel more connected. They're not easy, but they're really, really simple. So getting that relief and that validation that you are not alone. There's so many others with exactly the same challenges right now.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And again, Dawn Smith, you can reach her at her website, relationshipcoachdawn.com, and receive her free guide. And there's plenty of resources on her site as well that you can dive into. If you want to learn more about me, please visit me at greenwaywealthadvisory.com. And if you're curious about how to create a solid financial foundation, go through my program, Financial Foundations. And again, I'm doing it in like 6 meetings too. So we're right there. We're right there with each other, Dawn, that we're trying to make an impact very, very quickly. In my case, your finances. So Dawn Smith, thank you so much for joining me today on Money Chic.
Sherry, it's been so my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been great.
Thank you.
Ever wondered how to secure your financial future? Introducing Financial Foundations, the ultimate financial planning program. Take control of your money, plan for the future, and build a secure financial foundation. Join us on a journey to financial freedom. Visit greenwaywealthadvisory.com today to start your path to a brighter financial future.